Alice Hamilton, A Worker's Best Friend, by Ruth Cohen. The Hamilton Sisters. From left to right. Nora, Margaret, Alice, and Edith. Alice Hamilton's mother always did things a little differently. In the 1870s, most mothers wanted their daughters to marry men with promising futures. Girls were supposed to learn how to be good wives and homemakers. Women were not even allowed to vote, but Mrs. Hamilton wanted Alice to have a career. She wanted her to learn languages so she could travel and study. Alice Hamilton was born in 1869, the second of 4 daughters. Alice and her sisters were educated mostly at home. Mrs. Hamilton taught her daughters literature, and the servants taught them German. Alice's mother thought that the schools of the time were very strict. She also felt that the school day was too long for young children. When Alice was 17, she went to Miss Porter's School for Girls in Connecticut. It was one of the best boarding schools in the country. In a boarding school, students go to class, eat, and live at the school. Miss Porter taught girls the same subjects that boys were learning. Some people thought that sports were too rough for girls. Miss Porter did not believe that. Her students played sports, such as baseball. Many girls thought Miss Porter's classes were difficult, but Alice had learned so much at home that sometimes she was bored with her classes. By the time Alice received her diploma from Miss Porter's school, her family was having money problems. The Hamiltons had been a rich family for many years, but now Alice's father was no longer able to work. To help with family expenses, Alice's older sister, Edith, decided to become a teacher. Alice planned to become a doctor. Alice Hamilton graduated from medical school at age 24. Edith had learned enough at Miss Porter's school to become a teacher. But Alice was not as well prepared for medical school. She needed more training in science. She solved this problem by studying subjects like biology on her own. Her hard work was rewarded. She was accepted into the University of Michigan Medical School. Alice learned all about the structure of the human body. She studied why people get sick and how to make them well. She received her degree and became Dr. Alice Hamilton in 1893 at the age of 24. She was one of only 14 women in her medical school class of 47. In medical school, Alice had learned about many terrible diseases. More than anything, she wanted to find ways to prevent or cure these diseases, but she needed practical experience first, so she spent a year working in a hospital. Dr. Hamilton met many poor children while working at a hospital like this one. At the hospital, Alice saw hundreds of sad cases. Sometimes at night, a desperate mother would come to the hospital. Alice would follow the woman home and find a child near death. Often, Alice could help, but many times she could not. On her night calls, Alice Hamilton noticed the differences between herself and the people she helped. As a child, she had never been hungry. Her home had been large and comfortable. Now she was visiting poor people in their small, run-down apartments. Although few were educated at high schools or colleges, many of them were dignified, warm-hearted, and friendly. Their lives were hard, but most were cheerful and hopeful. In all her life before, she had never met people like this. After working in a hospital, Alice worked at a research laboratory. A medical research laboratory is a place to learn about diseases by doing experiments. Alice was trying to learn about diseases and cures for diseases, but she began to reject the idea of working in the laboratory for a long time. More and more, she wanted to work directly with poor people. At the time, there were almost no laws protecting them. Alice wanted to help poor people directly. Then Jane Addams visited the town where Alice worked. to give a speech about Hull House. Hull House was a place that helped people in a poor Chicago neighborhood. Jane spoke about all the good things Hull House did for the poor neighbors. Jane asked for people to help, and she said that doctors were especially useful. Alice decided that she wanted to work at Hull House. Alice worked in the laboratory for 2 more years. Finally, she moved into Hull House and began a baby clinic and taught medical classes there. Jane Addams was a young girl outside of Hull House. Many workers at match factories like this one became sick with phosphorus poisoning. As time passed, Alice learned more about the people of the neighborhood. She saw very bad living conditions. She heard about even worse working conditions. She saw men and women who had bad coughs from breathing fumes. Some had skin rashes from touching dangerous substances. More and more she understood that workers were not being protected from danger at their jobs. Factories that made matches, for example, used the chemical phosphorus. Phosphorus caused painful injuries to the teeth and jawbones of workers. Workers in paint factories were exposed to lead dust. Lead is an extremely dangerous metal. It caused people to become very sick, paralyzed, or insane. Many of them died. Alice began to write articles about industrial diseases. Industrial diseases are sicknesses caused by breathing or touching harmful substances at workplaces. At the time, most people had never heard of these problems. Workers had to breathe dangerous fumes without any protection. In 1910, the state of Illinois began a study of industrial diseases. Dr. Alice Hamilton became the leader of this study. There were many problems, and Alice knew she could not study them all. She decided to study the factories where workers were breathing lead dust. Most factory workers did not care about how lead was making people sick. When workers got sick, the factory owners hired new workers. They did not want to spend money to protect workers. They did not want anyone around telling them what to do. When Alice came around, they did not let her into the factory. So Alice got information in other ways. She talked to workers. She read hospital records. She went to drugstores and asked what medicines people bought. She slowly put together the information she collected. Alice found that more than 500 people had been poisoned by lead. The next year, Illinois passed its first worker safety laws because of Alice's work. Alice began teaching at Harvard Medical School in 1919. Alice kept studying factories and finding dangerous conditions. After a while, she noticed more people began to care about industrial diseases. Factory owners began to see that they were losing money. They had to keep hiring and training new workers. They began to see that they would make more money if they made their factories safer. Workers began to demand more protection. Alice Hamilton kept finding safety problems, and more people began to care. One of the most important things that Alice did was to make people aware of the problems. She told them about horrible factory conditions. She made people ask, why does it have to be like this? In 1919, after giving a series of important lectures, Alice was invited to become a professor at Harvard Medical School. Alice remained active long after she retired. Here she is at age 88. At Harvard, Alice continued her studies of industrial diseases. In 1925, she wrote an important book, Industrial Poisons in the United States. In 1935, when she was 65 years old, she retired from Harvard Medical School. Afterwards, she continued to work to help factory workers in the United States. The next year, President Franklin Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor, said this about Alice Hamilton. I sat there thinking of the thousands and thousands of people in industry who owe their lives and their safety to her, Alice Hamilton, because she had the courage to pioneer in research in industrial medicine. OSHA makes sure that workers are protected on the job. As Alice Hamilton grew older, many people cared about protecting workers from industrial diseases. Alice died in 1970. That same year, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, became law in the United States. Finally, there was an organization that could help businesses protect workers and make sure they did. Did you know? OSHA. OSHA now stands for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. OSHA has over 1,000 inspectors across the country. Their job is to make sure people have safe working conditions. OSHA has the power to close down any workplace found to be unsafe. OSHA tries to prevent accidents by educating employers and employees about safe work habits. They also require some workers to protect themselves by wearing safety glasses or steel-toed shoes. Workers in the United States are much safer than they used to be, thanks to Alice Hamilton and OSHA. Alice Hamilton was honored with a stamp in 1995. Alice Hamilton was honored in many ways for her important work. In 1987, the Alice Hamilton Laboratory for Occupational Safety and Health was created in Cincinnati, Ohio. In 1995, the United States Postal Service issued a postage stamp with her picture on it. Alice Hamilton died in 1970 at the age of 101, having improved the lives of thousands of American workers. Talk about it. 1. Alice Hamilton fought for laws to protect factory workers. What are some of the things named in this book that help protect people in factories? 2. What do you think would happen to the workers in the United States if Alice Hamilton had never lived? Write about it. 3. Imagine that you live in the year 1910. On a separate sheet of paper, write a letter to the newspaper about the danger of industrial diseases. Extend language. People abbreviate or shorten words and phrases. For example, the abbreviation of the United States of America is USA. An acronym is an abbreviation that makes a new word out of the first letters of a phrase. For example, OSHA is an acronym for Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Can you find any other examples of abbreviations or acronyms?